Holly Gildner, and I'm going to show you a little bit of information about electronic monitoring and how it affects employee privacy and also its benefits on employers. The basic argument for electronic monitoring in business comes from employees feeling like their privacy is being violated, which can cause anxiety, pressure, and inefficiency on the job. On the other hand, employers believe that it's very important to electronically monitor their employees, especially given the advancement in technology that we see growing rapidly today. Employers use it to assess employee productivity, monitor supervisors as well as lower level employees, and to protect business assets against things like theft and sharing of information. Electronic monitoring has definitely become a bigger thing thanks to the boom in computers and technology. It allows for monitoring the communication between employees and also between employees and the outside world. Pretty much all U.S. companies these days and almost all companies around the world use some sort of electronic monitoring, and we'll get to the types of monitoring that are being used by different companies and how it affects the privacy of employees. Some of the reasons for collecting employee information by employers is to review employee performance. If employees think that they're being constantly monitored or know that they are, they're a lot less likely to engage in misconduct. To ensure the protection of company secrets so that things that aren't supposed to be shared are not shared, or if they are, the problems are caught immediately and can be corrected. While electronic monitoring in business is legally accepted, it still creates a privacy issue for employees. Like I said, they just aren't quite aware exactly of what is being monitored and what may not be being monitored, which can cause a lot of anxiety and stress, and has also been related to health issues in employees such as depression, anxiety, fatigue, and anger, which also decreases productivity for those employees. Some of the electronic monitoring that we've used and that employers are using now with advancing technology are keyboard monitors that track keyboard strokes that can basically monitor how many keystrokes are made in a given amount of time by certain employees, which helps learn about efficiency of different employees in different departments. Also, email, chat, games, programs, and files that are accessed by employees can all be monitored by employers. They have the right to do so because the employers do own all those assets. Telephone monitoring is something that's been an ongoing controversy. Again, it kind of seems to violate the privacy according to some employees and a lot of unions. However, it is a great way to ensure that information that doesn't need to be shared is not being shared outside of the company. In all states, telephone monitoring is allowed and is legal. However, in some states, such as California, telephone recording is not a legal process without the permission of the people being recorded. As far as computer monitoring, employers have full access to any screen that shows up on any employee computer, smartphone, emails, that kind of thing. Employers have full reign over that. So even if you think that you're sending private emails through a work computer or work email account or something like that, they have access to that. Any games you're playing, they can see those screens too. Email monitoring is one of the biggest things. There are a couple ways that we'll get to that employees try to get around having their email monitored. But again, even if it isn't a work email address, if there's something about the business in that email, your employer has full reign to gain any kind of access to that they want. Social media is a big thing right now with Facebook, Twitter, things like that becoming increasingly more popular. Companies often try to regulate what employees can and cannot do and post on social media sites, not only to keep the privacy of the company where it should be, but also to regulate productivity of employees. If employees are spending too much time on social media, and especially if they're announcing things about the company that the company is not ready to release, it can be a huge problem. So it's becoming increasingly more popular to find social media regulations for employees in the employee handbooks. Video monitoring is again one of the older types of monitoring, but it's all over the place. Almost every business now is going to have some kind of video surveillance. Basically, the only thing that employers need to do in order to be able to monitor through video is have some sort of notice, even it's little as just a sign saying this company is under surveillance. Anything like that, any kind of notice at all will help them to be able to video monitor, which can help productivity as well. Like I said, if employees know that they're being watched all the time, they're a lot more likely to stay productive and a lot less likely to perform badly and to get into misconduct kind of stuff. Audio monitoring can go hand in hand with a couple of things. As far as attaching it to video surveillance, the only extra notice or the only notice that you need for audio monitoring if it's attached to video surveillance is notice that you're being videotaped. The audio part, you may or may not know that they're monitoring that, and they don't have to give you notice on that. As far as phone conversations go, in most states in the U.S., companies can record phone conversations. That's why I'm sure we've all made phone calls that say this call may be monitored or recorded. That's just a legal liability thing, and that's true. Almost all companies record pretty much all conversations. So it's advised that private conversations over the phone especially should definitely be done on one, a personal device rather than a work issued device, and two, on personal time, not company time. The at-will doctrine basically says that employees are hired and fired at the will of the employer, and the employer has full reign to hire and fire for whatever reason they want. And the only protection against that really is that they cannot hire and fire based on something discriminatory, race, sex, religion, origin, things like that. Otherwise, there's a little bit of protection for employees in the doctrine, but mostly if there's a privacy issue that has been violated, according to an employee, the employer is more likely going to win that court case because they do have access and legal access to almost all information that is provided in the work environment or through work technology. Some of the rules and regulations that need to be followed by companies in order to make their electronic monitoring legal are that, like I said, notice of frequency and notice of surveillance needs to be prevalent. That's like, again, what I said about the sign, this place is under constant surveillance. That's notice of the frequency of surveillance. Or if your handbook says once a month there are going to be random checks on email or something like that, that's the notice of frequency. The purpose of monitoring needs to be made clear, and that's again something that's often found in the employee handbooks. This is what we're monitoring and this is why. But again, employers have full reign, and they have full reign also to change those policies whenever they feel necessary. Written permission is needed for any kind of search and seizure of anything private. And by that I mean if you have a private email address and a private computer that you're using at home, but your employer has reason to believe that there's company information that's pertinent to them on that, they can get permission to search that and to seize that information. Governments also have full reign, being the entity that they are, to basically search and seize any information that they want. In 1986, the Electronic Communications Privacy Act was established, which basically just added to the rule that, or the law that says that wiretapping is not allowed. It added that electronic collection of private storage, which would be like your private hard drives, or like I said, your private home computer and email, that kind of thing. That is also not allowed except for by government or when it is within the work environment. If you're at work using your personal email address and personal computer, that is still on work time in workspace, and that can still be monitored. As far as liabilities of the employer, they're responsible to monitor their employees' activity, and electronic monitoring is just a more technologically advanced way of doing that than previously. Basically, they do it to protect their business information, like I said, to make sure that their information isn't being exposed to the outside world. Notice is always required for monitoring like that, but different types of notice, and a lot of it is, like I said, in the employee handbooks these days. The other thing is that monitoring cannot be discriminatory. You cannot discriminate and monitor only one employee or a certain group of employees without just cause for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you need to treat everybody the same as far as your monitoring goes. Employee protection. Employees feel like their rights are being violated and like their privacy is being violated through some of this monitoring. So unions especially strive to protect their privacy, especially through computers. However, they need to know that employers do have the right to access any information that their employees are accessing, because they own the company time and the company equipment that those employees are using to get that information out. And again, most of that stuff is laid out completely in the handbooks. Employees just don't necessarily always look into that as much. GPS is one of the newer, I guess, technologies used to monitor employees. It's not only found in pretty much all employee vehicle or company-owned vehicles, it's also found in some private vehicles that are used for company business. And that's basically just to track where the employees are, what they're doing, how long it's taking them to do certain tasks, and basically just monitor the efficiency of certain employees. States have the regulation on GPS monitoring. There's not a whole lot of federal law on that right now. As far as notice, like I said, pretty much all kinds of monitoring requires some sort of notice from the company, which is generally given out in the form of memos, like I said, the employee handbook, or like I said before, just a sign that could say under surveillance at all times. The Act of Notice of Electronic Monitoring is a new and upcoming act that is basically saying employees should give up their private information that is necessary to the company without the company having to drag it out through electronic monitoring. It makes the employer's job a lot easier to get that information that they need, and it makes the employees feel more at ease because they know exactly what information the employers are collecting. Collective bargaining is pretty much the only way around this kind of thing, and that's basically just an agreement between the employees and the employer of a specific company saying this is exactly what can be monitored, this is exactly how you can do it, and nothing else. And that's company specific. Encryption is one of the ways, and the most efficient way, I suppose, that employees get around being electronically monitored by their companies. They try to encrypt their emails because it's a lot harder for a company to intercept and decipher an email that's encrypted. However, that causes consequences for both the employer and the employee because it eliminates all legal protection for both. If there happens to be misconduct or exposure within those emails, both the company and the employee that sent them, even if the company knew nothing about it because it was encrypted, both can be liable in court cases. Government employees have it a little bit different than regular private employees. They have a little more leeway. There's not a whole lot of law regulating them, so most of the guidance on that kind of electronic monitoring is through the Constitution, which again doesn't say a whole lot about it because it's is a newer thing. Government, like I said, pretty much has access to anything. Employees can argue against, so if the government comes in to seize information that the employee doesn't think they necessarily need to seize, they can argue against that. However, again, with the government being the entity that they are, likely the government's going to win and it's going to be seized anyway. Financial and medical protection. Employers should never ask for financial or medical information, especially in an informal way. The Fair Credit Reporting Act requires a formal application if an employer does need financial information of an employee, and that can really only be based on something that is crucial to the job. They have to give reasoning why and how they obtain the financial information.